Thank you for joining Mind Body Relationship, where we talk about the mind, the body, and the relationship. And I'd like to welcome you. Of course, I'm Dr. Lori. I'm here talking to Shelley, who is my external supervisee. Yes. And you are partway through a little bit more of your practicum. And today we're talking about what happens when things go wrong. Because sometimes things do go wonderfully right. Time just passes, and according to the way in which it's supposed to, graduation occurs, and then you're off and running. And sometimes things get stuck and are difficult and frustrating, and there's no real manual on how to deal with that. How about if you introduce yourself, Shelley, to the people who are listening?
Yeah, so my name is Shelley, and I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying. I am doing the practicum portion of my Yorkville Masters, and I'm in the second trimester of practicum. As you guys know, Lori is my clinical supervisor, and so we have lots of great chats about everything I'm maneuvering through. It's been a journey, I think we could say at the least. It's been a journey. It's been adventurous, but we've been learning. Lori and I have, I think, both been learning so much throughout my experience. So hopefully my experience will be something that can teach others of what to do if they're stuck in my situation as well.
Exactly. Yes. What was the first thing that told you that things were becoming difficult? What would you say that was?
I think it was my interactions with the clinic director herself. There was a point where I realized that there was tension, there was something going on in our relationship, and it kind of clicked in my head, it cued in that, okay, things are not going to plan, they're not going to go according to plan. And I started realizing that I needed to seek out to my external resources and see what my next steps could be.
Yes. And so what did you learn? What did you learn the process was when things are starting to go awry?
So the truth is so I'm a student of Yorkville University, and they don't give you an idea of what to do when things start going wrong. So for me, I was like, okay, the only person I think I can speak with would be the practicum coordinator. So I reached out to my practicum coordinator and I set up a meeting with her. That was the first step, because as time was passing, I realized that things were not going well, and I tried a lot on my end to fix things. It wasn't working. So I'm like, okay, let's reach out. So I set up a meeting with her. That was step one. We talked about, everything I was going through. I talked to her about my concerns, and we talked about the possibility of adding a secondary placement or resigning entirely and switching to a whole new placement site in general.
Right. Now there's a caveat to that, to both of those things, right? And what is that caveat?
Well, you need your clinical director to approve both things. So if you want to add a secondary site, the director has to approve. If you want to do a mutual resignation, the director has to approve.
Exactly, right? So bottom line, that person has a lot of power. That's right, exactly. So, and there's another caveat too, right? Because according to the handbook, when it is that perhaps there is a mutual resignation, then you do get to go on to a different site. You get to continue exactly accordingly, right? And it doesn't affect your marks or anything like that, right? But the caveat is, if you don't get that, then what?
Then you get terminated. And that's a whole different situation. So there's a third one, right? So this was the one I was most worried about, and this is the one I got. So it was the termination. So with the termination, it's not a mutual resignation. It's more so that the clinic director is telling you, I don't want you to work with me anymore. Um, what's interesting in the manual is that it doesn't actually tell you precisely when, as a director, to do the termination. It is based on maybe the lack of clinical skills or ethical, values, and maybe just not matching up with the clientele and what they need. A termination is much more severe, and it's a lot worse, and it's much more anxiety inducing as a student who's especially, in this second trimester of their, their practicum experience in the last bit. So, um, it's yeah, you don't really get a say. That's the thing. As a student, you don't get a say. If you're terminated, you're terminated.
Oh, exactly, exactly. And so process wise, you hit your midpoint and you did your evaluation,
Yeah,
right? And everything was going really, really well. No concerns mentioned at all
right.
within what, a couple of weeks?
Absolutely. Probably 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, things turned around. Again, it was differences between myself and the clinical director, and as you know, Lori, I never had issues getting hours. I had really great clients that were returning. Um,
Mhm.
I've hit I've hit my number. I needed the 200 direct, 200 indirect. I have over 400 hours total. So it wasn't really, I would say, the clientele that had an issue with me. It's just I was butting heads with the director. And yeah, it brought us down to that termination aspect, and it is what it is, right?
Oh, exactly, exactly. And so then, of course, is the kind of like fear, right, that sets in because based upon how it is the school functions, you really can only have one fail throughout your entire academic master's period. And by getting a letter of termination, the truth is, then with that comes along a fail.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah,
And so receiving two fails means that you could be immediately expelled.
absolutely. What's come to light about I guess, the termination process is even if the clinical director says, I want to terminate you from the site, it's interesting because what I know for Yorkville is that they do the internal review and you're allowed to defend yourself as a student. So that's the one thing that's kind of great, especially in my case where, I feel like some things that were mentioned, I can argue them. So your clinical supervisor and you as a student, you're able to defend yourself. So the clinical director should be writing out a letter on their letterhead that states out all the points as to why they want to terminate you. And the school provides the student and the clinical supervisor with that letter. And so the two of us in our scenario would be able to defend me. And I think I get lucky with the fact that you are an external supervisor because you have been supervising me. You've been seeing my work, you've been seeing my progress. So it's not so much as biased as I think it might be if you had an internal supervisor. I'm not sure how those cases go, but I can imagine, right? The clinical director pays the clinical supervisor, so that could be a conflict in itself.
Exactly, exactly, right? And so, and usually there is a conversation that happens between the two, right? And then it is an agreement. It's a lot more difficult when it's an external supervisor because they're not within the practice.
Right.
There's no attachment there whatsoever, right?
Right.
So that is a significant difference. But also, too, the other fear is that even though you've attained 200 face-to-face hours, you could actually lose
Yes.
your hours.
Yes, that is a real fear because it takes so long to get to the 200. I feel like I was very lucky that I had really great clients that were returning. We built great relationships. And so I got lucky that I think I hit the mark quite early in my practicum phase. I think wrapping up that first semester, right then, I think I'd hit my 400 total hours. It was wonderful. But yeah, absolutely. So I think with the way that Yorkville does it, I got lucky because I did have that meeting with the practicum coordinator in August. So that's on record. And so my fears of being terminated, I explained it to the practicum coordinator. So I think that kind of worked in my situation a little bit. Of course, I don't have a final decision yet, but it's something that adds to, the case when the internal review is, done. And the defense that we put in, that would be something that either is a saving grace or not. But ultimately, if Yorkville University disagrees with the clinical director, they will actually force a mutual resignation.
Ah, so there's
Yeah.
hope. There's hope
Very
there.
small percentage.
Very small percentage. Otherwise, it's
Yes,
an appeal process to
right.
appeal the
Yes.
decision. And so that could take months.
It takes so long and you might get pushed a year behind.
Oh, exactly, exactly. So,
Yeah.
forced into accepting a fail, perhaps losing all of your hours, having to be on hiatus for who knows how long as it is the appeal process goes through, meaning that, of course, you're stuck.
Yeah. And it's 2
Uh,
months away from graduation, which is also tough.
Exactly, exactly. And coincidentally, because you are an RP qualifying, you actually only have a certain period of time in order to maintain that as well, right? And so then that starts ticking down too, as it is that you're in
Yeah.
hiatus, kind of waiting for the outcome,
Right.
right? Yeah, yeah. So a lot at stake because this is
Absolutely.
big money. Like how much money is school now? It's
It's
like
nearly 50,000 for this program, and I know it differs, but I also know Yorkville has raised their tuition fees recently as well. It's happened quite often, for quite frequently it gets raised. Even if it was half of that, 20,000, it's not easy for students to get that, and someone who's from Ontario, OSAP doesn't cover the entire amount, they cover a portion of it, and I guess students similar to me, I actually fast tracked, so it was quite a bit of money I paid out of pocket because again, OSAP will only cover what they're meant to because we're outside of that province. A lot of it comes out of pocket, and when you work really hard to make sure you can double up so you can fast track, and then you find out you might get pushed back anyway, it's a little bit of a bummer. Yeah.
major bummer, right? And well, and on top of that, interestingly enough, this really doesn't go under the heading of psychotherapy, the practice of psychotherapy per se, because it really comes down to the fact that this is a business decision. So we have what we think of as the practice of psychotherapy, which is completely different than a practice owner who's making a practice business decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a shock too, just to be able to realize the fact that there's really two components. One is the clinical work that we do, and that's what it is that you're working on, right?
Yes.
And that is the focus, except for the fact that you're also part of a business doing your practicum because you are at a practicum site.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you think about it, you can go to Yorkville University, so I guess it kind of plays in both ways. I mean, it creates a challenge for students because it's not like you can go to the CRPO and be like, "Oh, this so and so has kicked me out," because they're like, "Well, it's a business," right? So technically, they don't really owe the business itself anything. But on the other hand, it also helps us in a bit too because the business owner might not like me, but that doesn't mean my skills aren't where they should be. So it's
Mhm.
more so I think about, can I defend myself to the point where I can show that, my skills are at point, because how would I have gotten all my hours? How do I have clients coming back to see me on for the 8th or ninth or 10th time, and if they didn't like me, if I wasn't ethical? So I feel like the truth is also in the numbers. So I think it depends on who the internal review committee is and how they look at these things.
Exactly, exactly. It's like rolling the dice
Yes. Yeah.
and just seeing
It's
what it is that's going to
nerve-wracking.
happen, how it's going to play out, right? And
Yeah.
what this in the end is going to mean for you. Number
Right.
one, it means like a huge amount of learning because how else would you know
It's
unless it is that
true.
you go through this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think as therapists, when I speak to clients, I tell them that, yeah, you might feel like you failed, but you learn so much more when you fail and have to redo something. So it's more of, okay, I need to remind myself of what I tell my clients because that is the truth, right? You learn more when you fail. And honestly, that is what the case is. If you just kind of bypass every struggle and every obstacle, you don't really know what you did right or what you might have done wrong.
Mhm.
Um, so it's been an eye-opening experience, and I feel like you've been going with me in this journey as well, so it's been surprising. We've learned so much together.
Exactly, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so, because there are other students that come up against a wall very much like this,
Mm.
what are the learnings that you would like to extol to them now that you've
Yeah.
come up against this wall yourself?
My recommendation would be A, when you pick a practicum site, find a practicum site that you absolutely feel comfortable working at and, really make your boundaries clear. If there's a certain type of, therapy that you're not necessarily interested in, it's not something you want to do as a professional, make it clear. It's never a bad idea to try something new as long as it's in the boundaries of what Yorkville sets for us. I feel like that's okay. um, Ask questions, and the moment you feel that a relationship with the director or even your supervisor is becoming sour, be proactive, have conversations with them, try to be transparent and open with them. If it's still not working, reach out to the coordinator. Your coordinator, it's like almost like they're your HR in the situation, right, in a sense. So reach out to your coordinator and get it on their books that you had a meeting, because in my situation, I think that me meeting with my coordinator was something that was very helpful and will be helpful when the internal review committee looks at my case, because I've almost forewarned them of exactly what's happening now. Speak out, and I think that my biggest thing that I learned from this was I'm happy and I'm proud of myself that I advocated for myself. I'm proud that, I stood up for what I believe to be right, because that's what you would want your therapist to do for you, to advocate for right, not do anything unethical. And I think when I look back at it, I'm proud of my choices, even if it loses, my 400 hours, even if I get to the point where my graduation is delayed, so be it. I'm happy with where I'm at, but advocate for yourself, advocate for what's in the handbook. If you're not allowed to facilitate groups, do not facilitate groups. If you can't work with certain demographics, don't do it, because it's going to turn around and come back on you. So if there's ever anything that comes up where you're being asked to do something unethical, talk to the coordinator, have them write it down, let them know everything. I think that was my biggest learning in this experience. And honestly, it feels like it's a lot of money that goes to waste, but sometimes things are out of our control, right? So we teach our clients too. You can stress about what's in your control because you can actually change your action and your behavior to fix it. But things like this are not in my control. So if I'm sitting here and I'm anxious and I let it ruin my day, nothing productive is going to come out of this. So just keep working, right? Keep working with your clients until, the day of termination, doomsday comes upon us, like do what you can while you can and wait it out, defend yourself.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. And now that you've had this, experience, and what are your thoughts about how things are organized that, in essence, anyone can own a psychotherapy practice? They don't have to be a psychotherapist. They don't have to actually be a full RP. They can be, in essence, right out of school, right?
Right.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think it's challenging. So I think one thing with me that set me apart from other interns was the fact that I'd been in the field for a long time prior to starting even at Yorkville. So I've been in the mental health field for 5 or 6 years. But then other interns, this is brand new. So some of them were still nervous getting into the practicum. So I think it really depends on how much experience you have in the field and how you know how to handle clients. There's trauma informed care, there's client care in general. Um, it's a big responsibility. It's not something small to run an entire clinic. You're accountable for so much if you make a mistake. And I personally think that there should be a line. I think there should be a number of years where you work as a fully licensed therapist before you open a clinic. And I think that's not because I think that people aren't capable. It's more so just I feel like you should have more experience, because I also find that with a lot of people who open their own clinics and open their own practices, they become a broker for other therapists, not so much continuing to practice themselves. And I think until you have the experience of working under somebody else for a number of years, why should you take on the role of a director immediately? It's just, how you get promotions in a regular 9 to 5. It's, you need the experience to be a director, to be a manager, to be a supervisor, and if you don't have that, how will you run that practice efficiently, right? If you've never been in the shoes of a therapist long enough.
Well, it's true. In order to be a supervisor, you have to be in practice for 5 years,
Yeah,
right? And so then there's, of course, the course, the qualifying in order to be able to do that.
true.
And in that, of course, you're accumulating experience. And so, the more it is that you deal with people, the more it is that you learn.
Right,
And it's interesting the difference between what is supervisor and supervising as opposed to practice owner, right?
right,
And in essence, it's also in a way supervising, right?
right.
Because you're being supervised in the business, so to speak. Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
It's interesting. You're absolutely right. There's such a big difference between being the practice owner and then the supervisor. There's such a big difference in it. And I think that was one of the things that took me a little off guard in my situation where I was in my mind, I'm like, how could the internal review committee give the power to a clinic director, which I have almost not much interaction with, just between client sessions, maybe, compared to you who actually supervises and observes sessions with me. It's such a difference in what you do and what your responsibilities are. Um, and again, I think that if you're not at the point where you can actually supervise, a therapist after those 5 years of working in the field, maybe you shouldn't be a director. And it sounds terrible to say, but it's not because I'm belittling experience. It's just when I have clients come in, they want to know all my qualifications. They want to know all my certifications. They go onto my Psychology Today. They do all my research. I just think I personally would rather go to a clinic that where the director is someone who's been in the field for 5+ years because they know what they're doing. It's a very big difference between the two. So I got supervised in terms of booking clients and making sure that their payments went through, making sure I was doing correspondence. That's very different in comparison to you actually looking at my skills. And
Mhm.
so when you look at how that translates to the situation now, it's okay, am I being terminated for the way I interact with the clinic director? Or am I being terminated because I lack skills? Because the truth is, it's only my supervisor, which is you, who actually sees how it goes with the clients.
Hmm.
So very big difference in those two. And it's interesting that oftentimes the clinic director is the one that in that moment has the power to terminate. But is that fair? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. It's so strange how it is that it's organized.
Yeah.
And those are things that it's very interesting. You wouldn't even think about when you're looking for a practicum.
No. No idea.
Yeah, you wouldn't even think about asking
Yeah.
the question right from the beginning. How long have you been doing this? How many supervisees have you had? Have you ever had to terminate a supervisee? Right?
Right.
Like, yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the name of it would be. It's not supervising. It's not, maybe it's consulting. I'm not sure if it's even consulting. What would you say? It's,
I wouldn't
it's
even know. In my case it was directing. I'm gonna say it
interesting.
was it was
Yeah.
directing in my case for sure. I think out of everyone that I worked with, you're the only person that honestly, your clinical supervisor is the only person that could say whether or not you have the skills to proceed, and that's why you were the one that is meant to be present when you do the midterm, because we talk about our skills, not, how I interact with other staff, but Yorkville does it that way. So,
Well,
yeah,
and that is interesting too, because um, the form that we fill out actually really does have both. It does have part of it to do with how it is that you interact at the office with
yeah,
coworkers, with other students, right? That sort of thing. That part is really the information to do with the director because
mm,
they are directing you in that. We don't
Right.
meet as an external supervisor. We don't meet with the others that you're working with, right?
Absolutely.
So it is a combination.
Right.
And it was created when it was that there was no distinction. A practice owner was also a registered psychotherapist. And then when the CRPO came to be, that changed, because then anybody could actually really own a practice. And so they sort of separated the two. It's like the line down between the two of us, right? Separated the two, but the form remains the same. The interview remains the same, right?
Right. Which is also interesting because when you go through your like, I feel like anyone who's gotten to the point where they have their, their qualifying license, I would hope that you're mature enough at that point to have, you know, neutral conversations, right? Happy, polite, good conversations with your coworkers, with the director, anyone around you. I would hope you're professional at that point. Um, and so it's really interesting because when you're doing your master's, you do all the courses. It's all about client care. It's all about ethics and values and, like transference, counter transfer. You learn all of these things, but they don't talk about, how to deal with if you're working in a clinic or a practice and, the director doesn't get along with you. That's not something you're taught. So it's interesting that your form for the midterm includes that aspect in it because you're not told that. Not that I don't think anybody in that practice was ever rude or disrespectful to one another, but it's interesting because what do you do as a student when you feel like maybe you're the one being disrespected? And it's not the student who's filling out that form. It's the clinical director and the clinical supervisor. So it's almost like you don't really get a say from the get-go.
That's true. And on top of that, as you were talking, what really came to my mind is, as therapists, right? We don't fire our clients. Right. We don't hand out termination letters, thank you for being my
Right.
client, but I've reached the point where it is that, I've
Yeah.
decided elsewise. What we do is we refer, right? We make sure that our client is well taken care of, that transition, that obviously, perhaps the skills aren't matching for what the client needs, or, whatever it is that might be about, the need for that transition to bridge that gap to somebody else, which is just very interesting because in this, it's actually really quite opposite, right? There is no need to bridge. There's no need to provide anything further. There's no even need to provide resources to make sure that you're doing okay, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it is very, very business-like compared to our clinical work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think that I think there should be always, and maybe this is more of a personal thing, but I'm somebody who is kind of like, I don't want to break off a relationship with anyone, even professionally, without knowing that I've done my best to try to make it work. And I think that a mutual resignation is a last resort before you absolutely cannot make anything work. Unless, of course, you've done something unethical. I feel if you've done something unethical, if you've breached client confidentiality, if you've done something to harm a client in practice, I think then that's a whole issue. And I think termination is just for that. But in terms of your interactions, I think you try. When you realize it's just not working, then just consider a mutual resignation. Another thing, what I think about is the clinical director and even a clinical supervisor, you've been in the shoes of a student before, and you understand how scary it can be to hear that other students are getting terminated or let go. It's a scary experience. And to think that it's such an easy thing to do, you can just have a conversation, you send an email out, and all of a sudden, a student is having to restart their entire academic journey, possibly. Um, it comes as a shock. It's almost, you've been in this experience, you know what it's like to be in my shoes, you know how much it costs and how much work it takes. Um, and even with that knowledge, they decide it's not enough. I just want to terminate you. And it almost feels like it's a personal hit. It feels like a personal attack, and that's a whole different situation. And I remember being in this situation and I'm like, I just need to talk to somebody that could give me reassurance and tell me it's gonna be okay, just for someone to give, me a little bit of a break and calm my nerves. And I'm thinking I'm a therapist and I do that for everybody else. But when we're in that situation, it's like, who do you go to? The truth is you have no control over it.
No control whatsoever. The other question I had is, did you have fair warning? Because that's also another aspect of, because you've had prior employment, right? And so there, generally speaking, is a process. You are given fair warning, right? Like a sort of countdown to let you know that these things are not being met. Was anything like that provided to you?
No, not at all. I wasn't told like, Shelly, we need to work on this to see if you're still a fit for this clinic. Shelly, you and I are butting heads. There were conversations on, I feel like, there's been tension between us, and I acknowledged it. I said, yes, there is. And the only issue was, I feel like the issue I had with my clinic director was more something personal. I think I'm somebody who's learned to advocate for myself, and not everybody likes that, and I understand that. But I think if I want to advocate for clients, I have to advocate for myself. If I can't preach something I don't practice, in my opinion. So the entire practicum experience was transformative for me as well, because maybe I would not have been as, like, I wouldn't advocate as much as I did in this situation hadn't I had this experience. But there was no warning that, Shelly, I will need to terminate you if so and so isn't fixed. If you don't work on this, I'm gonna have to terminate. It hit me out of nowhere. There was
Mhm.
one conversation that was had in August where I tried to kind of calm our nerves, and I said, I have no issues. I don't want arguments. In fact, like, things about criticism, I said, I welcome criticism. Constructive criticism is important. There were sometimes phrases said where all I have to do is say one word and you would be terminated. And that was the point that I went to the practicum coordinator, because I don't tolerate threats.
Mm.
So that was the moment I went to the practicum coordinator. But that happened over a month ago. And then all of a sudden, one day, I'm having dinner with the family and I get an email from the clinic director that you're being terminated. And it came as a shock. It came as a shock. And I was in disbelief. And I told you, Lori, when it happened, I just started laughing because I said I knew something was coming. And it was just my initial reaction. I just didn't know how to handle it. And yeah, I went into the spiral of anxiety, which happens, but
Right.
that's what happens when there's no warning. You don't know how to work up to it.
Oh, exactly, exactly. It's a shock. It can be quite traumatic, right? And yeah, taking a fair period of time to, in essence, come to terms with as well, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah. Uh, I've come across this before. We have had lots of conversations about it. And I thought
Mm,
that it would be great for us to have a conversation for others that might,
right.
be coming up against this sort of thing, or even, just information to know,
Yeah.
oh, like what would happen if it actually really doesn't go well. And I think a lot of people think, well, number one, they don't think about it in those ways, that of course it's
Mm,
going to go well, right? And then, the next part is, who do they go to? How do they, figure it out? Because it's quite complicated. Who do they ask for direction from, right? And so, and I thought it would be great for you to be able to talk to your peers to say, yes, this actually does happen. And what do you do when it does?
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
wish you well. I know that everybody wishes you well. We'll
I
keep
hope
everybody
so.
posted as to what happens.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
And we'll see how much time it takes in order to be able to, transition from what's happening right now to the next, to actually being able to then continue with your practicum to see whether or not you actually really have to start again.
Absolutely. And let's hope that's not the case. But At this point, if it is, then it is, and I'll just have to roll with it. The good thing is we know I'm capable. We know that I'm able to hit the milestones needed, you know, to further my license. So I think that's okay, and that gives me peace. It's not that I wasn't getting any clients at all. I did get a good number of clients, so I feel like I'm lucky. I know that I would be okay. But yeah, we just one day at a time, and we'll let everybody know what the updates look like.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Well, thank you, Shelley. And if anybody out there has any questions or, are in the same boat, would like to talk about it for sure, reach out. I'd love to interview you. Give us a like and, of course, subscribe.
Absolutely.